They planned to give my apartment away without telling me. Christmas dinner was supposed to be calm. Just family, some laughs, maybe a little peace after a year full of crap. Instead, I overheard my parents talking about moving my sister and her whole family into my condo. My condo. The one I bought after years of overtime. The one I fought tooth and nail for. Mom said, "He doesn't need that big place all to himself. Family should share." My sister laughed. "We'll redecorate it, make it ours." Like I wasn't sitting right there, 3 chairs away. I didn't say a word that night. Didn't scream or storm off. I just watched them, raising their glasses, celebrating their plan like they'd already won. They thought I'd stay quiet like always. But this time, silence was the last thing I could afford. I was carving the turkey when I first heard it, my family, whispering in the corner like I wasn't even there. At first, I thought maybe I misheard, but it got louder, sharper. They weren't just talking about me. They were talking about me, about taking the house, my stuff, the things I thought were mine. Like I was already gone and they were dividing the spoils. I froze, knife halfway through the bird. My hands started shaking, but I kept going, carving the stupid turkey, because if I stopped, maybe they'd see me losing it. But inside, rage was bubbling and I couldn't make sense of any of it. How did it get to this? I'm sitting here, holding this knife, while they're carving up my life without a word to me. I pretended not to hear as long as I could. The chatter was quiet, but I caught words like entitlement and not contributing, like they were trying to justify ripping me off. And there was Mom, calm but icy, saying things I'd never want to hear from your own mother. It's not like he's looking after it properly, and he's not capable. Every word felt like a punch to the gut, twisting in a way I didn't expect. The disbelief hit first. I couldn't even find the breath to speak. I wanted to yell, to shove the whole damn turkey down their throats and tell them how wrong they were. Instead, I sat there, swallowing that fury, trying to hold on to whatever shred of dignity I had left. My chest tightened. Anger and shame tangled up so tight I thought I might scream or just break. I felt like my family had turned into strangers overnight. The people I trusted most, trading whispers behind my back like I was some absentee tenant, not their own blood. Maybe I hadn't been perfect. I hadn't kept everything spotless, hadn't gone out of my way to show I cared. Yeah, I was a mess sometimes, but this felt like a betrayal that cut deeper than anything else. I could have handled disappointment. I couldn't handle this. I glanced up, trying to catch Mom's eyes, looking for some sign, any sign, that she'd stop, that this was some twisted fantasy I'd imagined. But her face was bland, almost blank, like she was confident in what she was saying. My brother, smirking like he was proud of himself, enjoying how well he was playing his part. Everyone else, nodding along, not saying a word for me, not standing up. That's when I knew this wasn't about closing ranks or family loyalty. They were actively planning against me. I pushed the plate away without thinking, the turkey now forgotten. The knife scraped against the cutting board, loud in the sudden silence around the table. The air felt heavy, suffocating. I realized I'd been holding my breath. "Are you serious?" My voice came out lower than I expected, quieter but sharp enough to cut through the room. They all turned slowly, like they'd been caught red-handed. Mom gave me a "what are you talking about" look, but her eyes stayed cold, distant. My brother, the usual loudmouth, looked surprised for half a second, but then he just smiled that damn smirk again, like he'd won. "I hear you," I said, trying to keep control, though everything inside wanted to explode. "Talking about taking the house, taking my things. Am I wrong?" I could see the way their faces tightened, the heat in the room rising, but no one denied it. That's when I realized how deep the fracture was. My family, my safe place, had decided I was the problem to be solved, not the person they protect. I sat back down, the knife slipping from my grip, and tried to swallow all the bitterness rising in my throat. I kept my eyes on the table, numb, but inside, something snapped. I didn't say another word. I cut the turkey while they carved up my life, and somehow, sitting there, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I can still hear my mom's voice, clipping and sharp. "You're the good one. The responsible one." Like it was a medal slapped on my chest, but weighed down my spine. I was always the fallback, the keeper of every loose end. If something needed fixing, money, cars, bills, I was the guy. Everyone else, treated like kings. Especially my sister. She had this way of walking into a room and instantly bending the light to her will. Never had to answer for a dollar spent. Never had to watch her step or think twice. Vacations with first-class tickets. Dinners I paid for while she laughed between bites like I was invisible. Emergencies? I was her safety net. The phone would ring, and I'd move. I paid their debts, their vacations, their emergencies. They all called it love. I called it training. There was no conversation about it. No thank you that felt like it mattered. Just an unspoken expectation that I'd always be there. Wallet open, shoulders wide. Heart maybe a little cracked but trying not to show it. Every Christmas, every birthday, even random weekends, I was the one left covering costs nobody else wanted to touch. And I didn't complain. Not out loud. It felt like saying no might crack the fragile glass kingdom they'd built around themselves. So I just kept paying. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in my small apartment, surrounded by silence, the weight of all those years pressing down. I wasn't naive. I knew they needed me. But there was this line between helping and being a doormat, and sometimes it blurred so much I couldn't tell where I ended and they began. I wanted to be the good guy, the dependable brother. But it felt like I was the unpaid keeper of their luxury. Like I was currency they could cash without a second thought. I remember one time, after another family emergency that turned out to be a dropped phone or a cruise change fee, they all gathered to tell me how lucky I was to have such a close-knit family. "We love you, you know that," Mom said. But love was always wrapped up in transactions. It came with an unspoken bill attached. And I started feeling angry. Not the loud, explosive rage you see in movies. No, this was cold, quiet fire that simmered under my skin. Like a secret ledger of every dollar I'd ever fronted while they took their treatments and therapies and coffee runs like it was all nothing. I hated how much love looked like money in our family. It made me feel used, even though I rarely let it show. Sometimes I'd catch my sister looking at me, maybe realizing I was more than the ATM she never had to ask. But I pushed it down, nodded, smiled at her like a good brother should. Inside, I was counting moments, debts, slights. And somewhere in that counting, a little plan was taking shape, a way to finally make them see. Not with words, because none ever seemed to stick, but with action. Quiet revenge. I didn't want a scene or a fight. I just wanted the scales to tip, even a little. To be noticed, not for how much I could give, but for who I was without money involved. Because beneath the calm, beneath the control, there was this longing I barely admitted to myself. A desire to be enough without cash, without saving everyone else's skin. Maybe I should have said something. Maybe I should have drawn a line earlier. But you grow up learning that responsibility is your cross to bear, especially when you don't want to be the selfish one. So I carried it. For years. Silent, steady, resenting every "I know you'll understand" because I didn't. Not really. And then, one day, when I was at the end of that long rope, I realized the only way out might be to stop carrying. But that thought scared me, too. Because what happens when the good one stops being good? What happens when the quiet fire finally burns out? I thought I had it all under control. But the night I decided to make them see me wasn't the night of a big blow-up or a meltdown. It was quiet. Too quiet. And that silence, that calm before everything changed, creeped in like a shadow I couldn't shake. I thought it was just the end of the old me. I was wrong. After dinner, just as I thought the night was winding down, my dad cleared his throat and said, kind of casual but too calculated to be real, "So, we were thinking." I looked up from my empty plate, trying to catch his eye, but he kept that easy smile, like he already knew he'd get what he wanted. Mom was beside him, smiling too, but it wasn't warm. It was the smile you give when you know you're about to drop something on someone that they can't say no to, even if they don't want to. She said, "We were wondering if maybe, just for a little while, your sister could stay at your condo." I blinked, stunned. "You mean, like overnight?" I asked, because I wasn't sure I'd heard right. "Yeah, just for a bit," Mom said smoothly, leaning in like she was explaining rent terms to a tenant. Except, in that moment, I was the tenant who didn't know I'd been evicted. I felt a cold hollow opening up, but I kept my voice steady. Why would she stay with me? Dad looked at me like I'd missed the obvious. "Well, her place is getting some repairs done, and we thought it'd be easier for her. Less hassle, you know." I nodded slowly, feeling that familiar knot tighten in my chest. The thing was, this wasn't about her convenience. It never was. They were testing me, seeing how far they could reach. It was the first time they'd openly tried to invade my space since I moved out, and it left me weirdly exposed. like this tiny bubble I'd been protecting was about to pop. Mom added, whisper sweet, but with an edge, "We know you work late," and she's quiet. "It won't disturb you. Just temporary." Like I was supposed to be grateful they thought of me at all. I didn't want to say no right then. I felt, somehow, like resisting would be more exhausting than going along. But inside, I was already bickering with myself. Boss up and set boundaries, or just swallow it to keep the peace. They'd cycled me through guilt trips before. I wasn't sure if I had the strength. "Temporary, huh?" I said, trying to keep my tone light. But there was a bitter edge I couldn't hide. "How temporary are we talking?" Dad shrugged, like it was no big deal. "A couple of weeks, maybe. We'll figure it out." "What about my space?" I asked, heart pounding, the familiarity of my life shrinking faster than I realized. Mom's smile didn't falter. "She'll only take the guest room. And you're not going to be home much anyway, right? You work nights." Her words hit different, like they assumed my life belonged to them, like my condo was some extension of their domain, not my own. I wanted to say something sharp, but ended up nodding because the fight just seemed futile at that moment. Deep down, I knew this was the start of feeling boxed in again, the kind that sneaks up quietly and hard. I could see it now, how they twisted their kindness into a leash. And yet, the thought of telling them no felt heavier than any small invasion. "Okay," I said finally. "We can try it." Mom's smile deepened, like she just sealed some unspoken deal. Dad patted my shoulder, friendly but possessive, and I felt more like a cog in their machine than the adult I'd worked so hard to become. Later, when I was alone, I sat in the dark of my condo, the silence closing around me differently than before. This wasn't just sharing space. This was them testing the limits, an uninvited return, wrapped up in temporary favors. And what scared me most was how easily I'd agreed. I sat there, quiet, watching them move in slow motion like puppets on a string, pretending to believe they were winning. My sister was folding her clothes, placing them in boxes as if this was something normal, like she was just going on a trip, not walking out of my life. "Look at this place, finally ours," my brother-in-law said, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. His voice was all bravado, but I heard the shakes underneath, nerves trying to act brave. I nodded, holding in a smile that felt wrong but necessary. I needed them to think I was defeated. Needed them to think they had me trapped. Every box they taped shut sounded like a countdown ticking down for them, not me. Like the sound grew louder with each slap of the tape, the seconds slipping away on a clock they couldn't see. I sat still, my hands folded, as my sister joked about the fresh start we were all having, unaware how carefully I was plotting every moment of this. They wanted to brag to the rest of the family, turning everything into a victory parade. I swallowed hard when I heard her say, "No more living under your rules." Finally free. The words stung, but I let them fall. No reaction. I steadied calm. Let them believe they'd won. In reality, my mind was racing, calculating every little detail. How they were packing up just the right things that would make them think this was a happy ending. But they didn't know I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. When she picked up the old family photo from the shelf, I almost laughed. That photo was the last thing I'd ever give up. Let them take the furniture, the clothes. But some things, I wasn't letting go of those. Not yet. My brother-in-law grabbed a box heavier than the rest, bragging about how big their new place was, how it had space for all our crap. I nodded, slow, deliberate, playing the part of the clueless sibling. I studied him for any sign he doubted himself, because if he did, I could use that. I was waiting for a crack. They talked loud, planning dinners, weekends away, all the freedom they dreamed of. It was like a show, and I was just the audience. But inside, I was rehearsing my next moves. How I'd remind them this wasn't really freedom. I had all the cards, they just didn't see it yet. When they started filling the car with boxes, I stayed behind, the room already feeling emptier but the air thick with tension. I closed my eyes, the silence ringing in my ears. I wanted them to walk out that door and never look back, thinking this was the end. But it wasn't. I heard the door slam, then the car engine roar to life. The sound of their departure settled in the space like a challenge. I opened my eyes, a strange calm washing over me. Not relief, not victory. Something darker. I was ready, waiting. They thought this was over. Thought they could erase me by walking away. But every tape strip sealing those boxes, every word they said about their new life, it was just the countdown to when I'd have the real power again. I let the door click shut behind them, then turned back inside. Their pride was going to be their undoing, and I was ready to make sure they never forgot who held the strings. I met the realtor on a Tuesday afternoon, right when the light was just dull enough to feel like I was sneaking around without being obvious. She was sharp, mid-30s, with that professional smile that doesn't reach her eyes. I told her to keep this quiet, as if that wasn't obvious. No one in my family had any idea I was doing this, not even my sister or dad. They had their own chaos, and I was just the quiet kid in the background. We walked through the apartment slowly, room by room. I pointed out everything that made it valuable: the hardwood floors, the updated kitchen, the fact that we were in one of the rare buildings with a decent view downtown, even if it was just the parking lot. She asked the usual questions and took notes, but I barely looked at her. I was checking the place in my mind, picturing the contract already signed, the money moving where I wanted it. When she finished, we sat down at the tiny kitchen table. I didn't raise my voice, no point. I raised the property value instead. Listed at the top of the range, I told her. No room to negotiate. She blinked a bit, surprised, but then smiled and nodded. You sound confident. Good. That confidence was my armor. Leaving that meeting, I felt a strange kind of calm. Not relief exactly. That had come later, maybe never, but the cold certainty that I was making a move nobody saw coming. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the one overlooked and underestimated, the one they never thought capable of doing more than keeping the peace. But now, I was the one deciding the next chapter. Back in the apartment, I went through rooms one more time, closing cabinets, locking drawers. No sign that I'd been there. Nothing to betray the fact that everything was about to change. I could imagine the look on their faces when the realtor called them to talk about showings, offers, and then, eventually, the sale. They'd have no idea I was behind it because I never wanted them to see me coming. I never had to raise my voice in this fight. The only sound I wanted was the ring of the phone when someone made an offer, a sound that meant I was finally shifting power, one quiet step at a time. But even as I locked that door behind me, I felt the weight of what I was doing settle in. This wasn't just a transaction, it was a signal. Someone was waking up. Someone was done waiting around. They think I'm still the kid who keeps his head down. But in this game, patience is the deadliest weapon. The realtor called a few days later. A buyer was interested, serious, ready to move fast. I didn't celebrate, not yet. I listened quietly, took notes, asked for details. Every word was a piece falling into place. When I hung up, I caught myself imagining my family's reactions, the shock, the questions, the confusion. I might not have said a word to any of them, but this was louder than any argument I could have started. I'm not done yet. This is just the beginning. And if they ever find out who made the first move, it won't be because I told them. It'll be because I've already won. I remember sitting there, the contract paper cold and stiff against the kitchen table where I'd shoved it last minute. The signatures were already done, mine, his, everyone's, and yet they still hovered over the sale like a bad joke no one wanted to admit. I'd handed over the last of the checks, the keys, everything that tied me to that place, but it might as well have been handing over a grenade. While I was quietly finishing the deal, signing off on the last details, and wrapping it up with the agent, I kept hearing my phone buzz nonstop. Turns out, the family was already buzzing around the new place, playing house like it was all dreams and sunshine. They'd bought curtains, picked out furniture, even snapped pictures outside their future home. Selfies, laughing, grinning like fools who thought the world was theirs. I stared at those pictures, my throat tightening. The frame of the balcony was in every shot, and they all said the view was perfect. I agreed with them. The view was perfect, especially for watching everything fall apart. You ever have one of those moments where the irony almost trips you up? Like, there you are, signing papers that will crash their whole fantasy down, and inside, you're burning. The thought that they were hanging curtains over empty walls, blank rooms that weren't really theirs yet, made my stomach turn in an unusual way. A strange mix of satisfaction, bitterness, and something close to anger bubbling beneath the surface. I looked across the table at the agent, nervous but polite, asking questions about the handover process. Meanwhile, my mind kept drifting to those pictures. There they were, sitting on that balcony, dangling their feet over the edge, beaming under a false sky. I wanted to shout at them, to tell them it was all a lie, that this wasn't their home, not for long. But I didn't. because part of me reveled in their ignorance. They didn't see the cracks forming beneath their feet. They didn't know the house was sinking. Not literally, of course, but something worse. The fragile, carefully built world they thought they had was poised to collapse, and I was the one holding the matches. The house smelled like fresh paint and hope in their photos, but I smelled smoke. Their excitement echoed in my ears as I typed up the final emails. So excited to make memories here, the text read. Can't wait for the housewarming, hee hee. A slow, creeping anger settled in my chest. They made jokes about furniture placement and weekend barbecues. I sat back and smiled quietly, maybe a little too much. Because I knew what they didn't. That those pictures, those plans, they were paint on rust. Everything was going to fall down around them sooner than they expected. Later, they called me. My phone lit up with their voices, bubbly and frantic, full of plans about color schemes and layouts. I kept my replies short, vague even. I didn't want to give anything away, but I couldn't stop the quiet satisfaction creeping under my skin as they prattled on, oblivious. There was a coldness in that moment, hard to explain. Not pride exactly, maybe something sharper, bitterer. I wasn't just watching them. I was part of the machine that was grinding their whole dream to dust. I kept telling myself it was justice. But after a while, I wondered if I was just afraid. After I hung up, I stood by the window and looked out toward the city lights, trying to steady my breath. The silence of the night felt heavy. I thought maybe I'd finally exhaled, like the storm was over. But then my phone buzzed again, a new message. And with it, so did the weight of all this finally crashing down on me. I was standing on the porch when the trucks pulled up, the sun already too hot against my skin. I saw my sister's car first, packed with the kids squirming and laughing, like nothing was about to rip apart right in front of us. Her husband was following behind with some boxes. I waved, tried to shake off the sinking feeling in my gut, telling myself this was just another family move, it had to be. But then the keys came out. My sister held them up proudly, smiling like this was going to be the fresh start she promised me. She jiggled them in the lock. Nothing. I saw the confusion flicker across her face fast, the kind you get when what you expect suddenly isn't happening. He came up beside her, trying the key too. Maybe it's the wrong set, he muttered. But there was no doubt. Those were the keys he'd handed her last week, the same he insisted were the only ones. The porch felt heavier with every second. Then, from behind us, this old guy appeared. He looked to be in his 70s maybe, dressed like he was ready for yard work, holding a key ring that glinted in the sunlight. He dropped the keys into the lock and twisted them with ease. The door opened before any of us could even blink. Sorry, folks, the man said, stepping aside as two younger guys in grease-stained shirts followed. You're not supposed to be here. This place is mine now. I felt my throat tighten, the warmth in my face rushing away. My sister's mouth dropped open, the kids quieting down behind her. I wanted to reach out, to shake him, to scream. How could he just open that door? You sold it, I asked, voice barely more than a breath. He shrugged, like this whole thing was a favor, a done deal. Yeah, you won't be getting the house you thought. My sister stumbled forward, angry tears starting to fall when I caught a glimpse of the papers in the guy's hands. Signed contracts, dates, stamps, evidence. Proof he'd been working against us, all this time. My chest squeezed so tight I almost couldn't breathe. The last months felt like a lie sliding out from beneath me. Every, I'll fix this. Every excuse, all unraveling with one simple twist of a key. I glanced at him, desperate to find something. Remorse, regret, even anger. But all I saw on his face was blankness, like a stranger who just took what he wanted. The kids started to cry, and my sister moved to pull them close. I didn't know what to say or do, just standing there frozen, watching everything I thought I knew dissolve. The men began dragging boxes in, setting up like they belonged, like this was their victory. I swallowed hard, tasting bitterness that wasn't just about the house. It was betrayal, deep and raw, that I wasn't ready to face. I wanted to scream at him, ask him why, but my voice caught in my throat. All I could hear was the strange silence beneath our shock. The laughter, the hope, the plans, all stopped. From 3 blocks away, I swear I could almost hear it. Then I noticed my sister staring at me, panic rising in her eyes. We can't just let this happen, she said quietly, her voice trembling but steady. And suddenly, I realized this was just the beginning. The house was gone, but the fight wasn't over, not yet. My phone started blowing up like crazy. At first, I ignored the screen, but then the missed calls just kept piling up, one after another. 98 missed calls. I swear, I counted. It was like watching a scoreboard of their panic, their fury, their helplessness. Funny how they remember your number only when they lose what's theirs. I sat back, not even mad anymore. More like detached, watching the flood of angry texts rolling in. All caps, threats, begging, insults. They were all there. Mom calling me selfish, Dad accusing me of stabbing them in the back. The voicemail notifications mocked me with their little red dots. I clicked on one just to hear Mom's voice trembling, asking why I was doing this to them. I couldn't block them. Not yet. Part of me. I don't know. Maybe I wanted to see how far they'd go now that they'd lost control. Because before, it was all about them calling the shots, telling me where to be and how to live. But now, with each message, I felt this strange sense of calm settle in, like the storm was finally hitting their side of the glass. There was a bitter sort of irony in hearing their panic through the phone. I imagined them pacing in the living room, glued to their phones, replaying every conversation they'd had, trying to spot where I slipped away, trying to piece together how they'd lost me. I could almost hear Dad's frustrated sighs and Mom's shaking breath between sobs. I didn't respond. Not a single message. Not a call back. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I pushed it away every time. Because replying would have meant stepping into their chaos again, being dragged back into the mess I'd just escaped. And I wasn't ready to do that, not this time. I scrolled through the texts, and a cold realization hit me. All those years, it was like their love came wrapped in expectations and control. They only noticed me when I fit the mold or when they needed something. But now, with their desperate calls flooding in, that love felt like a cage they just lost the key to. And the funny thing? I didn't miss it. Not even a little. As the hours passed, the notifications didn't stop. If anything, they intensified. I felt their panic like a wave crashing against the shore, relentless and raw. At some point, I glanced around my empty apartment and for the first time in a long while, felt a quiet serenity. I was somewhere they couldn't reach. Somewhere that was mine. Still, it was strange to watch them lose the power they always held over me. Part of me wanted to tell them how it felt, to let them know this isn't punishment, but survival. But I kept silent, mostly because I was exhausted. And maybe because I wasn't sure if I believed they could hear me even if I screamed. The night crept in, and the calls slowed to a trickle. The barrage behind me was still there, but quieter, like a storm that spent its worst fury. I stared down at the screen one last time. So many missed calls, so many messages, and yet, here I was, still untouched by their frantic grip. I thought this was it. I thought the worst part was over. But the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was something else. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in my hand, the screen lighting up with a new notification. It was from my mom, a voice message. I almost didn't want to listen. I'd been avoiding her calls, her texts, everything for weeks now, but something about this one felt different, like I needed to hear it. I tapped play. Her voice came through, breaking like glass. Please, you don't have to do this. Please, just undo it. Please. She was crying. Not the quiet, controlled tears I was used to on the phone, but raw, broken sobs that caught in her throat. The kind that make you painfully aware this isn't just words. It's a surrender. I stayed frozen, phone trembling in my hand. She sounded desperate, like I was the only thing standing between her and everything she wanted but couldn't control anymore. I had never heard her like this, not really. Usually, it's all about the rules, the threats, expectations. But this was different. There was no judgment behind the tears, no anger. Just this unbearable need to rewind time, to pretend none of this ever happened. And for the first time, something inside me shifted. Not guilt, not even anger, just clarity. I realized that I wasn't trapped in the story they'd been telling me my whole life. I saw it now, the strings they'd tied so tight around me, the way they'd convinced me I was responsible for their happiness, their reputation, their shame. But none of that was mine to carry anymore. I looked at her face in my mind, the way I'd imagined it while listening, shaking, worn thin with worry. It was a good mother, buried under years of control and manipulation, maybe even love, messed up and misplaced. I thought about how many times I'd bent to her will, erased parts of myself just to keep the peace. How many times I'd swallowed the knot in my chest, the nausea, to keep her words from breaking me apart. I hated that I'd let her hold that power for so long. But hearing her like this, it wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a plea. And not just for me. It was a kind of self-plea too. Maybe she saw what I was becoming. Maybe she was scared. Or maybe she was just human beneath all of that control. I pressed stop on the message. The silence in my room felt heavier, but also clearer. I didn't need to respond. I didn't need to fix it for her. This was my choice now. I put the phone down, breathing slower, feeling something I hadn't in a long time. Freedom. It wasn't loud or triumphant. It was quiet and small at first, like a seed planted in the middle of wreckage. Maybe, I thought, the worst part was losing her. Whatever her really was beneath the cracks and fury. But maybe losing that wasn't as painful as losing myself. I let that sit with me, heavy but oddly welcome. The past wasn't something I had to drag into the future anymore. This moment was mine. I heard my phone buzz again, a new message flashing across the screen, but I didn't pick it up right away. Because I knew, finally, that I could choose when to respond. And when to just walk away. I wanted to believe it was over. But a quiet, sinking part of me knew it wasn't. Not yet. I didn't lose a family that day. I lost my captors. It wasn't like I woke up and suddenly felt free. No, it was slow, like the first time you breathe fresh air after being underwater too long. The past, all that mess, didn't vanish. It hung around, a weight I still carried. But I finally made a choice that wasn't for them. Not for their control, their blame, or whatever twisted idea of loyalty they had. When I moved here, I told myself this was the last time I'd ever live by their rules. I rented a tiny apartment above a little bookstore downtown, nothing fancy. It's quiet here. I wake up to the hum of the city waking up too, which is strangely comforting. I'd spent years suffocating under their demands, their constant demands. Any moment I thought about myself first was met with guilt, manipulation, or outright punishment. And then one day, I just stopped answering. I remember sitting on this scratched-up wooden floor the first night I got here, the furniture still wrapped in plastic, and feeling a strange kind of calm. Like finally, the noise stopped. The voices didn't echo anymore. I wasn't their puppet. It hurt. More than I expected, and yet it was the first time in years I didn't feel cracked open. They tried to call me, text me, send threats wrapped in apologies. I ignored it all. For once, I didn't want to explain. I didn't want them to pull me back in. I started small, ordering food I actually liked without hiding it, walking around without looking over my shoulder, taking the bus alone. Little things, but they added up. It was like reclaiming pieces of myself that I didn't even know were missing. I started a journal, not to write about them, but about me, who I was outside of their shadow. It scared me, though. Reliving moments without their presence felt unreal, like standing in a spotlight for the first time in forever, vulnerable and exposed. But I stuck with it. One night, I cooked dinner for myself. No audience, no approval needed. I sat down, ate quietly, and I realized I wasn't withholding a single bite, a single smile, out of fear. It was just me. That was it. That small moment hit harder than anything else. The years of walking on eggshells, the guilt trips, the constant twisting of reality. They couldn't reach me where I was now. I haven't told them where I live. I don't want to. If they wanted to find me, it would be easy. I'm not hiding behind fake names or locked doors. But I'm done explaining. Done justifying. I'm not their project or their weapon anymore. I saw how toxic our family really was. And this, not them, is what feels like a home now. I even started seeing someone. Not anyone they'd approve of, that's for sure. But someone who listens, really listens, without expecting me to play their game or prove my worth every time I open my mouth. It's new and fragile, and I catch myself holding my breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it never does. And that's slowly teaching me that maybe trust isn't just a myth. There are still bad days, lonely days where the old whispers creep back in, where I question if stepping away was the right thing or if I'm just running from my problems. But I keep reminding myself, the problem wasn't me. It was what I was trapped in. And breaking free wasn't weakness or betrayal. It was survival. Sometimes, when the city lights blur outside my window, I think about how close I came to losing who I was for good. How easy it might have been to stay chained because it was familiar. But this uncertain, shaky piece, it's worth every messy step. I'm not whole yet. Maybe I never will be. But for the first time, I'm choosing me, not them. And that feels like a quiet kind of victory. The silence I have now isn't empty. It's mine. And for once, That feels like enough.